After over 25 years of marriage, we've learned that successful couples have great friendships, put each other first, and focus on light just as much as love. We believe marriage should be fun and easy.
Our goal is to share our journey with the hopes of helping others build strong, happy relationships. Join us as we continue to create our lives beyond I do. Before we get into our episode, we want to share this disclaimer. We are not marriage counselors, nor are we mental health professionals. We simply want to share with you what has worked in our marriage. Now, on to our episode.
All right. On this episode, we are joined by Miss Erin Darden.
Esquire.
She is a emotional intelligence and romance relationship specialist.
In addition to an attorney, I'm gonna brag a little bit on your behalf because that's beautiful. We love it. All right, so Miss Erin, if you would please tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what it is that you do, and the floor is yours.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. Any chance I get to talk about emotional intelligence and the importance of it in building and maintaining healthy relationships, I'm all for it. I really think that this is my purpose at the moment. Like you mentioned, by trade, I am an attorney, and I was stressed out.
Right.
I probably knew within 2 months of practicing law that that's not why I was created. And I went on this journey trying to figure out, why were you created? Like I had, not my whole life, but the last, I would say 10 years of my life planning on going to law school, go to law school, do well, graduate, get an amazing job with the government. I get there and I hated it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was difficult to accept that, being an attorney is something that people admire. And here I am, miserable every day. Right. I cried every single day that I had to go to work. Wow. And so that's how I knew that this wasn't for me, right? I believe in God, and I don't believe that God would have such a thing for my life. Right. And so I went on a journey to try and figure out what it is he would have me to do. And one of my friends asked me, like, what if the fact that everybody always asks you for advice has something to do with your calling? I'm like, I never thought about it like that. I just always wondered, why do people ask me? I actually don't ever give advice. I help people figure it out. Mm-hmm. And after some searching, I figured out that coaching is my thing. It always has been. I've always been a go-to person, even though I don't give advice, but I help people figure it out. People always talk about, they feel like they could talk to me about anything. I'm a safe space. And so I said, okay, coaching. But now what? Because you could be any type of coach. Right. And I started to think about things I had to overcome because I believe that God doesn't bring you through things for yourself, right? It's so that you can help other people. And the most recent issue I had was at work. One of the reasons that my job was so miserable is because I had what I thought was a condescending supervisor. Okay. And he would write all over everything that I did. Nothing was ever right. He would always come and say, oh, you're missing something. And that relationship at work, it made me doubt myself. Mm-hmm. It made me feel unheard, right? I had done so well up until now. And every time he would come to my office, he would start with, there's something missing in this brief that I wrote. And I just couldn't figure it out. And I just so happened to be in getting my coaching certification at the same time. And we were on the topic of emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. And emotional intelligence works for any relationship. Mm-hmm. Right. So I was learning at the time that, right, pay attention to how you feel, right? Figure out why you feel that way, which I could do, right? He always told me that I felt wrong as a new baby Black attorney, right? That can shake your confidence. You have concerns about that. So I knew that. I knew that I was anxious. I knew I felt incompetent. But the third component of emotional intelligence is where everything changed for me. And that's empathy. And that's taking the time to see things from the other person's perspective. Right. I never thought to stop and think about why he is the way that he is. And the minute I did, everything changed for me. Mm. And I realized that, right, he would write all over my stuff, but he only made grammatical changes, right? He didn't know enough to make substantive changes. So he was making happy to glad. So that was the only authority or control he felt like he could assert.
Mm-hmm.
And I also learned that he likes to teach. So he thought it was a teaching moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so now once I figured out him and I understood him and I understood me, the whole dynamic of the relationship changed. I knew how to talk to him. I knew how to bring things to his attention. I almost knew how he was going to respond before he did. Right. And so that relationship was no longer an issue for me because I learned how to manage it. And so as I was figuring out what type of coach I wanted to be, right, I thought about emotional intelligence, and it was something that I was truly passionate about. But I said, you usually hear about emotional intelligence in the workplace, right? That's where they usually offer the trainings, right? Superiors learning their subordinates, that dynamic. But I said, well, what about personal relationships? Because our personal relationships have a bigger impact on our quality of life. We are quick to leave a job that is not serving us, but we're not so quick to leave those personal relationships. And so I started to implement the skills of emotional intelligence in my personal relationships, both romantic and platonic, and life got so much easier for me. I gained so much clarity, especially when it came to communication. I was extremely shy. People don't usually believe me. Growing up, I didn't talk to people. I shrugged all the time. So to be this person now that can effectively communicate what I'm feeling, I'm not concerned about how somebody's going to receive what I say. Right? I really take the time to think about how I need to say this so that they can hear what I'm saying and understand and avoid unnecessary, because I don't argue, avoid an unnecessary argument, all of that. And so it has really made a huge difference in just my quality of life personally.
That's awesome. So you've spoken about emotional intelligence. For the listeners, can you give us an overview of what emotional intelligence is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the textbook definition, right? Emotional intelligence is your ability to identify and understand and manage your own emotions, but also to understand your partner's emotions, right? And to use all of this to move the relationship forward. The way that I like to explain it, it is the way that you know what you're feeling, you know why you're feeling the way you feel, and you know how to respond or to bring it up to your partner in a way that they can receive it, that you don't continue this arguing for no reason, right? And it benefits the relationship. It has a lot to do with conflict resolution, right? So I tell people all the time that conflict is inevitable in a relationship. Right? It's how you deal with it that matters.
Right.
And so I think one thing that sometimes people don't understand is that the yelling, the screaming, the shouting, those are actually signs of a lack of emotional intelligence. Right? It is, people don't usually believe me, but you don't have to fight and argue in a relationship. That does not have to be the norm.
Right.
And it all has to do with making sure that you understand how you're feeling, why, and what to do about it.
Right. And you mentioned the workplace. With me being in education, there's a big push now for socio-emotional learning in schools, because I remember vaguely in elementary school and middle school working with the counselors. They would come in, and then when I started teaching, they would come in like maybe once a month, and they would do little lessons, little social lessons. And along the way, those things have been cut out. And so I think that the lack of emotional intelligence is something we're seeing, because you have to be taught, even though you feel the emotion, you have to be taught what to do with it. So
absolutely,
it's almost like we're kind of backtracking now with making sure that people are aware of their emotional intelligence.
One of the things that you kind of brought up when you was talking about your boss in that situation, I had a coworker, this was years ago, and I was trying to figure out why he was, the way he was. And he was just rude to everybody. I mean, it didn't matter who it was. And once I learned who he was, and I learned what his background was when he shared some things, it helped me to deal with him in a different way. So once I learned that information, it didn't upset me. So say what it was due, because I knew it was coming from a place of low intelligence.
Absolutely.
An inferior point, like he felt like he had to attack people to make himself feel better. So when you know where it's coming from, it's like, well, and that's one of the things that I kind of learned. I didn't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, once I learn a person who I'm dealing with, and it makes it easier for me to deal with them and their level of maturity, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point.
And our communication styles, right? I know the big thing is, right, we want our partner to communicate effectively. Like that's like one of the first things people say, like, especially when I'm talking to clients, like, well, what is it that you're looking for in a partner? Oh, he got to be emotionally intelligent. He's got to know how to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And most people are neither. There is a survey by Talent Smart. I think it said only about 39% of the population is emotionally intelligent. Only 39%.
Right.
So that means the majority are not. Yep. And communication is a learned skill. We don't grow up necessarily learning how to communicate, right? Especially when you talk about emotions and how we are taught to deal with our emotions or not, or taught to ignore our emotions. And if you can't process your emotions properly, there's no way that you can be an effective communicator. And right. So the way that people communicate, you can always trace it back to, their childhood, right? For an example, somebody that may be loud and just in regular communicating, not necessarily on arguing, right? Somebody that is loud and very assertive, right? It could be a sign that as a child, they weren't allowed to talk or their voice was taken away from them. And so now they're going to make sure that they get their point across.
Right.
Those are some of the things that I help people realize that, okay, what is your communication style? How did you get here, right? Why is this your communication style? And does this work for your partner? Because just because that's your communication style, that doesn't mean that's your partner, right? Y'all may communicate differently. Y'all may resolve conflict differently, right? And you have to learn how to be able to honor both of you guys' style and your conflict resolution style. And so, it definitely goes back to, the way that you were raised, how you saw conflict handled growing up, all of that.
I know for us, there was an issue. It's been like a couple of years. It was a recent thing. And we had gotten into this big blow up and emotions were high. And for me, because of childhood, that was like a huge red flag. And it was like, okay, we got to stop because, arguing is going to lead to leaving. And it was that extreme for me because in my household, there wasn't any calm communication to resolve a conflict. It was, there's a knockdown, drag out, blowout, and then somebody leaves. And so in the midst of it, he stops and tells me, baby, that's what people do. People have agreements, and then we talk about it, we discuss it, and then we move on. And this was, after over 20 years of being together. So it's important to understand, like you say, the background and where those things come from and how we carry those things with us into adulthood.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And another thing, once her and I communicated on certain things, and we talked about this on the previous episode, it helped me to understand where some of the things were coming from. When she felt comfortable communicating with me and telling me, some of the things she had been through as a child, because I didn't understand it. I didn't grow up in the same environment. So it helped me to understand her actions more. So like I say, with that employee, it helped me to, okay, well, I know where this is coming from. So it's not an attack on me. It's the emotions that, at this time she was lacking the ability to express. So that helped a lot, just knowing the background, the history, all that stuff. So
So once you have someone who is aware of their feelings, how they process feelings, how they express them, actually how they process them, we get to expression and to communication. So what are some things that with couples who are having a difficult time at that point? Like, I know how I feel and how I've processed this. So now what do I do to convey how I'm feeling?
Yeah. So I would say we would have to back up a little bit first. One, sometimes in terms of even just identifying emotions, everybody is not good at that, especially if you are told to ignore your emotions your whole life. Don't cry, man up, you'll be okay, right? Those things strip you of your emotional vocabulary. And I just had the whole conversation about the idea that men are more logical and women are more emotional, which is not true. I did a whole conversation on it, right? And so when you strip somebody of their emotional vocabulary, it makes it harder for them to identify what they are even feeling, right? There are the core emotions. There's like 5 core, like happy, sad, angry, but you need to go deeper than that. Do you feel betrayed? Right. Are you disappointed? Right. And so that is also something, right? That's where it starts. People don't really know. They just know that they have this negative emotion. They're angry. They're sad, especially for men, unfortunately, because men are sometimes taught to ignore their emotions. When it comes up, right, they think about socially acceptable ways to exhibit those emotions, right? Violence, aggression, but there's something else going on. There's something else that triggered it. So that is the first thing, learning how to actually identify what you are feeling like. Exactly. Processing. A lot of people, I would say most people, don't really know how to process what's going on. And so when I am working with somebody, this is usually something that we spend a great deal on, because people make up a lot of stuff. And so you can call it processing, but it made it up, it's not going to help you. And so I tell people, when you are learning how to process your emotions, as soon as you recognize a change in your shift, your energy, right? First, identify what it is that you are feeling. The second thing is to identify the trigger, like what caused this shift. Why is this a trigger? That takes self-awareness. And then once you are aware of why this is a trigger, you have to ask yourself, is this a me thing, a them thing, or a us thing? Right. Is this something that is triggering one of my insecurities that I need to work on? Or is it really something that, your partner did? And then once you figure that part out, is what is it that you want to do beforehand? I believe in going into a conversation with a game plan. You got to know, or you should know, what it is you are hoping to get out of this conversation. Are you looking for change behavior? Are you looking for just to vent? Because all of these things play a role in your ability to communicate and how the conversation is going to go, right? If I can come to you and I'll share my magic sentence that I give my clients. But if I can come to you and share this magic sentence with you, a lot of arguments will go away. A whole lot of arguments. But the issue is that people try to talk before they have processed their emotions. Right? And so you cannot be emotional and logical at the same time. Your brain does not allow it. Right? And so if you are still so consumed with the emotions, you don't care what they're saying.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it makes sense or nothing, right? That's when sometimes if you have to go back and think about what they said, and like, oh, they were right. Dag, I shouldn't have said that. That means you were still consumed and you were reacting out of emotions. So processing is a big thing. A lot of times I have to talk to people about making stuff up, right? When there is a gap, we are prone to filling a gap with negative things that are not true.
Okay.
Right? If there is a gap. And so instead of asking, you should ask for clarity instead. But instead, we just jump right in. Oh, well, he meant. Is that what he meant?
Right.
Okay.
I see what you're saying. So instead of asking for clarity, you hear something and you
jump.
Decide it's a negative thing. And okay, I see what you're saying. I think we do that a lot. I see that with students that I work with a lot.
So there are a few things that I tell people that to be careful of when you are processing, right? One is filling in the gap with misinformation. And one way that you kind of make sure that you don't do that is ask yourself, is this a fact or a feeling? Because feelings are not facts. And so is this conclusion that you came up with supported by facts that you can identify? So I'll give an example. So let's just say there were plans to go out and he didn't answer the phone. Didn't answer the phone and he's late. Right. That may trigger something in her. Like say it triggers anger or disappointment inside of her. Identifying the trigger, it would be him not answering the phone and him being late. Now, why is that a trigger? Let's say if it was the last person that didn't answer the phone and didn't call was cheating. So now I feel like this person is cheating because he didn't answer and he's late. right? That's a me thing, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a feeling versus a fact. That's a feeling because he never gave me any reason to believe that just because he's late, he didn't answer, he's cheating.
Right.
Right. At that point, I am projecting past experiences onto this relationship.
Right.
Or even just the way that somebody talked to me. Did this person mean it that way? Or is it because growing up, when I heard it, it meant people were leaving out the door?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then from there, what is it that you need to do? One, if it's he didn't call and he's late. And so now I feel like he may be cheating. So what may need to happen? It may be something on both parts, right? I may need to get over that, work through that insecurity. But also as I'm getting through it, I may need to ask him, hey, if you're going to be late, can you at least send a text message?
Right.
Can you at least send call me or, just let me know in advance that you're going to be late.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then, but it has to be both parts. You can't just ask him to call and text and you not work through that insecurity or whatever that trigger or that feeling is. Right. It has to be both parts. Right. And so now that I know what I need to be different, right, I need the corrected behavior. So now when I go to him, and this is the magic sentence that I give people, I tell people, I felt like when you did, on which date moving forward can we do X, Y, and Z? Mm-hmm. So it could be, I was disappointed when you were late one Saturday, because you got to be specific, and you did not call. Moving forward, can you at least text me if you are going to be late? Avoids a huge blow up.
Yes.
But that takes time to get to that point, which is why you have to make sure that you aren't trying to talk to somebody too soon, right? If you're still in those emotions, there's no way possible for you to formulate that sentence and have an effective and logical conversation.
Okay. Now, there are situations we have some couples that we know of that, let's say one particular individual was in a failed relationship. There was some abuse there. There was a lot of verbal abuse. And the other person is coming in who has a lack of, I don't know, just successful relationships. Take these two people and combine them. What is some advice that you could give to couples?
Yes. Yep. So the first thing is always going to be self-awareness. You got to understand who you are. You got to understand, your areas of growth. You got to understand what you need and what you want from your partner.
Right.
And so depending on that is going to formulate, how you guys handle conflict, how you guys communicate. But you definitely have to be to a certain level of healed. Right. Because if you are not healed, there's no way possible that you can consider somebody else. There's no way possible you can take the time to step outside of your own shoes and, see things from other people's perspective. And so if you are truly, life happens. We are all the sum of our experiences. Yes. And so I don't know anybody that has had, a perfect record, right? There's some type of hurt, pain in our past, to different levels. But at some point, I feel like we have all been sad. We have all been angry. And we carry that with us into relationships, right? And so I think the first thing that you have to do is to just really take the time to learn yourself. Know who you are, the good, bad, ugly, indifferent, the not so nice, the areas of growth. Like, you have to be honest with yourself. Right. You have to be honest. Like, none of this putting on the front, not wanting to show this person who you really are. Like, if this is going to be your person, if you're going to be with this person forever, right, that's the part that they have to also accept.
Right. Exactly.
And so that I would say that is the first thing. You got to be honest with yourself about who you are.
Right.
And I think once you are honest, I think you have to find somebody that values who you are and has the capacity to deal with your areas of growth. Right. So they value your strengths and your areas of growth. They have the capacity to deal with that.
Right.
And I think other than that, you have to find somebody that wants the best for you, is willing to help promote you grow, right? And this goes both ways, right? I'm just saying in one way, but this has to be on both sides. And, really willing to take the time to understand who you are, why you are the way you are, and how you guys fit together. I always say it all the time. A relationship It's just two people learning how to coexist.
Yep.
A lot of the things that people consider relationship issues or things that I see people get a divorce for, like I have people come like, we want you to help us and then tell us if we should get a divorce. I'm not telling you that. Are you crazy? Absolutely not. But what I can do,
a divorce.
like, absolutely not. Like, I've never done family law. It's not my thing. Even then, I still would never tell you whether or not you should get a divorce. Right. But what I can do is, walk you through your issues, help you really identify what is really the issue. What's the problem?
Right.
And then figure out whether or not you feel like you can make through this. I think a lot of the problems that people think are relationship problems, it usually comes down to one or both partners' areas of growth. Right. And so this is why a question that I get all the time is, how do you help people with relationships or their marriage and you're single? And I say, because, I am good at the individual level, the things that people typically think are relationship problems usually comes down to one or both partners needing to grow, right? If you can't communicate, that's not a relationship problem. That is one or both of you do not know how to communicate in a way that the other person can understand. Right. When you have conflict, again, a lot of times it comes down to how this partner feels and how that partner feels and making sure they understand each other. And so when I work with people in a relationship or married people, what I am trying to do is help them understand each other, right? So that they can work through whatever issues they feel like they have and also deepen that intimacy.
I wanted to touch on conflict resolution and how and when to learn those skills for conflict resolution, because obviously a lot of times in the midst of conflict is not the ideal time. There was also something I wanted to hit on, and I guess we could do it now. I wanted to go back to something that was said a while back when we were talking about emotional intelligence and how men are, you got to man up, boys are not supposed to cry. One of the things that I have experienced and a lot of people in my circle have experienced as a woman, specifically a Black woman, is you got to be strong. So is that another dynamic that you find from women where there's a stifling of emotions because, you have to be strong?
So yes and no. First of all, I think strong is a cuss word. I don't let people call me strong. I agree with you.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Strong is a cuss word. Don't call me strong.
Oh, you're so strong. Do it. Like, I want to be weak than a mug right now. Huh?
I tell people, don't call me strong. You cussing at me.
Strong Black woman.
I don't want that strong Black woman. I don't want that life. I don't. That's not what I want. And so I don't know if I would say that is equivalent to men being stripped of their emotional vocabulary when they're taught to man up and don't cry. I think it's different in that when you are calling a woman strong, I think we typically know how we feel, right? It's about the type of help we get when we are feeling a certain way.
Right.
I think if anything, it actually creates more emotions because when we have this strong Black woman complex, a lot of times it can lead us to feeling like we're failing, like we aren't doing enough in life, right? I can't keep the 20 balls in the air that I'm trying to keep in the air. And so just because I drop one, right, people are like, oh, you strong, you can do it. Keep all 20 in the air. And when you can, because who can, right? I think it actually creates more emotions and making us feel inadequate or like a failure. I think we can still identify the emotions, even though we are considered strong. It's now, what do you do about it, though? Right. What type of help do we get at that moment? And so that's an interesting question. I don't know that I would. It definitely has different implications than, man up and don't cry. But I think it's like it might have similar implications, like I'm not allowed to be tired. Right. I'm not allowed to. Okay, so maybe it can be similar. I'm not allowed to be tired. I'm not allowed to be, exhausted or overwhelmed because I'm supposed to do all of these things. So I think it can be, the equivalent to, telling men to man up and all of that. it can still teach you to ignore what you are feeling.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, that was a big one for me. And and it's odd because I was very self-aware. I still am, and I can identify certain things. But when it comes to processing those emotions, that's where I was stilted and not knowing how to process things or not wanting to. Sometimes that blankness was comfort to not feel anything. So processing of those emotions.
And that makes sense. When I first started therapy, or when I first went to a psychiatrist, and I was telling him, like, you know, I'm used to doing 50 million things at once. Like, it's always been my life, even as a child. Like, I would go to school. I had an activity every day after school. And so this has always been my life, to be involved in so many things. And so I was telling my psychiatrist, like, I don't understand why this is any different. And he said, you know, I think I actually told him, like, I feel like I'm failing at life. And he was like, you're not failing, you're tired.
Right.
And I stopped. I said, but I've always done this. And he said, if I asked you to hold a 5-pound weight, could you? I said, yeah, it's 5 pounds. He said, now what if I asked you to hold that 5 pounds for a week, for a month, for a few years? And I just looked at him like, oh, yeah. So our capacity changes.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Individually, it's 5 pounds. 5 pounds doesn't sound like a lot, but now I got 5 pounds, and you want me to add in a relationship and work, and you know what I mean? And then what seems so small, it's 5 pounds, right? Now it feels like a ton. And he was like, you can put it down and rest. I said, I can put it down.
You put it right.
That's crazy. I never thought about that. And that's when I gave up the whole strong thing.
Yes.
It's funny because, you know, I remember watching Joyce Meyer one time, and she was talking about, you know, she said, I'm complaining to God, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, I got this going on, I got that going on. And she said, she specifically heard God tell her, you know, you're the one that make your schedule. And so when I think about society where we are now, you see all these motivational people on social media, you know, and I hate the clickbait. They're like, you could be doing this. You could sell real estate. You can do this. Why are you not doing, you know what I'm saying? And then it's like people are made to feel like they're inadequate because I'm just working a 9 to 5.
Right.
And that's what I decided to do. But it's like, well, you got to have 15 streams of income successful in this day and time. And, you know, not going to make it. And they're going to the world is going to eat you up. And it's like, well, everybody ain't fit for that type of lifestyle. You know what I'm saying? So I think that a lot of times, I know with the younger generation, they feel almost inadequate. Like, what am I going to do? I'm just working a job. I'm just working 2 jobs. You know, sometimes you need to rest.
Right.
Yes. Sometimes you need to rest. And so that survey that I mentioned earlier, where it said only 39% of people are emotionally intelligent, it also talked about people that are emotionally intelligent make more money. Because I think it was for every point that you raise your emotional intelligence, you make about $1,300 a year for each point. And that's because when you are emotionally intelligent, right, you are aware of your strengths and your weaknesses, and you play to your strengths. And so to your point, right, not being out here trying to chase this fad or this trend, or get on that or make a quick, you know, some quick money, right? If you really take the time to learn learn your strengths, what is it that you are good at? What are the things that you do innately, right? People come to you for help with. What are the things that you can do with your eyes closed? What are the things that you do and you don't think twice about, but people are like, oh my God, how did you do that, right? Play into that, right? Social media is both a good and a bad thing, right? Because you can find out so much information, you know, but I think you got to be self-aware first so you know what to listen to and what not to listen to.
Right. I know I get wrapped up in things like that, but our child, when she was 19, this was around the time when I think it was Khaled was saying chasing the bag. So that was their thing. They're chasing the bag and all this stuff. And I explained to her that a 19-year-old who has parents should not be supporting themselves. I said, at 19, you're either in school, maybe you are working, but you're still learning. I said, a 19-year-old who is fully self-sufficient either comes from a dysfunctional home and there's no parental support, or they're being a know-it-all and think they can do things better than that adult that would provide support. I said, but that's not really the best case. That's not really the best case scenario. And she was like, but my friends, they have apartments and cars. And I said, if they're doing all of that on their own, there's dysfunction in that. And she said, well, some of them do sell drugs. So I'm like, you are letting the drug dealers tell you that you should be self-sufficient when truly their self-sufficiency comes from illegal means.
Listen to me. At this, how old am I? At this big grown age, I'm 35 years old. If I could move back in with my parents,
right?
Listen to me.
Right.
I would. I would. So I have a podcast as well. And I had my mom on an episode because my parents this year will be 50 years that they've been married. Awesome. And so before, I had to thank her for the job that they did in raising me because of the stability. I feel like that allowed me to really be me and explore the things that I, wanted to do or what I didn't want to do.
Right.
And I think all of that is so important, right? I didn't have to work until I was an adult. And so I think, having that ability, it really allowed me to, I think, flourish. Right. And so I had to thank her for that stability. I think people sometimes underestimate what that does for a child. But when a child has to worry about paying bills, right. Or, and I get it, right? Things happen. Sometimes that is, the situation. Right. And, you do what you have to do at that point. But to the extent it is an option, I absolutely believe in provide the stability for your child so that they can go and explore and learn themselves. Right. Let them go and bump their heads and know that they have a safety net to come home to.
And that,
I think that's important.
That was one of the things I told our daughter, like when you look at, I said, your situation and your friend's situation is different, because her parents just said you're on your own. Whereas we're telling you, hey, crawl before you walk. Right. And the independence looks great. Yeah, all that. But trust me, baby. Look. Trust me. I go back to that childhood bedroom and get him $200-$300 a month and be like, okay then.
I tell my students all the time, I'd love to switch places with them. To not have a bill come with my name on it. What? All you want me to do is schoolwork successfully? I was like, I'd make up a whole new grade scale. I got a 5.0 grade. I'm taking extra classes. I'm graduating and coming back and graduating again. But that type of support is necessary. And I'm thankful that we recognized that with our own kids. Now, our son, that wasn't good enough for him. So he stepped out there, but he's learning now. He should have listened. And she's determined. She's 22 now, and she's determined she's moving out by the summer. She's working towards it. She's saving. So, I'm proud of her, but at the same time, she knows that this is her move and not a move that she's being made to
and
take.
The other thing I told her too, I said, half of them people lying to you. People probably got their mom and them financing, paying their rent, paying their car, paying their insurance. So I said, you're not fully grown until you're paying everything that it takes to sustain you by yourself. That's when you're totally dependent. I said, other than that, some of them got parents paying car notes, probably got, they ain't paying no insurance every month. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't believe the hype.
So one more thing before we get into let's discuss it. We've talked about emotional intelligence and communication and conflict resolution. How do all of those things come together? One of the things from our first meet and greet and from some of the information was about deepening your connection as a couple. So how do all of those things come into play to help a couple strengthen that bond?
Absolutely. So I think the things that help in a relationship, right? There needs to be intimacy. And when I say intimacy, I don't just mean sex, right? I mean the ability to be vulnerable, the ability to let this person really see who you are, right? To share your innermost thoughts, to share your dreams and your visions, and know that it's a safe space and that you are going to be supported. That's not easy to find.
Right.
Right. Sometimes we feel like we have to put on a mask, or, they are not going to understand who we are and what we're trying to do. And so I think to have that intimacy is like the number one goal for a relationship to be healthy. One of the ways that you can have that intimacy is to really see your person, right? See your partner, not just who you want them to be, not this vision in your head of what you have your relationship to be, right? Really see the person in front of you. Right. Not trying to change them, not trying to make them into what you want to be, right? See who's in front of you. Mm-hmm. Right? When I am working with women that are not in relationships, I tell them the same thing, right? Make sure you take the time to learn this person, and then you decide whether or not this person deserves to be in your life. Right. This is not about changing somebody. This is not fulfilling a fantasy in your head, right? You see who's in front of you. Right. And so I think once you see who is in front of you, find ways to help them grow. Mm. What can you do? How do you add value to their life? Right. And again, this is both ways. How do they also add value to your life? Right. I think you have to stay in good spirits with each other. You're not going to always like each other, but to always want the best for each other, I think that is going to be important, right? Because you're not always going to like each other. You're not always going to get along with each other. But to know that I really, truly care about this person, I want to see them succeed, I want to see them win, I think it makes the hard days manageable, right? And I think other than that, right, communication and conflict resolution is going to be a big thing, right? Conflict, right? Money problems and communication are like the biggest issues in a relationship, right? And so when it comes to communication, you got to make sure that it's a safe space emotionally for both people, right? Acknowledge how your partner is feeling, right? Validate what they're feeling. Ask them what they need. He'll be like, how do I know what he needs? Ask him. Ask her, what do you need from me in this moment? Right. Do you need a hug? Do you need to vent? Do you need me? Like, what is it that you need? Recognize the differences. Right? You're not going to be exactly alike, right? You may need time to process when this person wants to talk right away. How do you guys work through that, right? You may raise your voice when you talk, but that may be a trigger for your partner. What do you do about this, right? So it is okay to be different. It is okay to have different communication styles. It's okay to handle conflict differently, but we got to work together to get through this, right? We have to make sure that we are a team, right? And a lot of times I have people come and say, oh, he did this, she did that. And a lot of people like to point the finger, but I am big on self-awareness and accountability. Right. 90% of the time, the person pointing the finger also has something to contribute or has contributed to this issue. Absolutely. Right? And so we have to be honest about that, right? And so when I'm working with people, the first thing that I do is I let them go ahead and do a dump on me. Tell me exactly what you feel like is going on, why, all of that. Because then we need to get to the real issues of it. Because a lot of times it's not what you think it is. Right. And once we are able to identify what exactly the problem is, why do you feel unseen? Why do you feel unheard? Why do you feel like you're walking on eggshells around your partner, right? Once we are able to get to the root of those things, right, then comes the accountability. What part have you played in this? What part have they played into this? Right. Yep. Are these issues that we can move past? Because I tell people, I don't think that everything is solvable. Right. Unfortunately, if you wait until after marriage and realize that your partner doesn't want kids and you do, is that something that can be solved? All right. But to the extent it is more of a matter of being misunderstood, more of a matter of we don't know how to communicate with each other, those are things that we can work through. Right. There's a difference between knowing how to communicate and what we are communicating. Right. And it's the how that people usually have a problem with. Right. I'll give you the link. I have a list of communication mistakes that couples make, how to fix them. So I'll make sure I'll give you guys the link to that. But it says things like bringing up more than one issue at a time. Right. If I say you did X, Y, and Z, and you talk about something else, we're never going to get to the root of anything or solve anything if we just keep bringing up with, something else and something else. It's not going to work. You should also use I statements, right? You is accusatory. Somebody's going to get defensive, right? You got to say, I felt like. Focus on the emotion, not what they did, because they're going to try to justify their emotion. I mean, their actions, and the action may not be the problem. They may absolutely meant the action. The issue is how it made you feel.
Right.
So I have a whole list. So I'll make sure I share that with you guys so that you can, put it out there for other people in case they need it. But just know conflict is inevitable, right? There's nothing that you can do to prevent all conflict, right? Like I said earlier, it's how you deal with it that matters. And that's when you just have to have a good game plan, right? And so that's what I help people do, create a communication or a conflict resolution game plan. And so where you recognize your communication style and your partner's communication style, how they differ, and things you guys need to work through together, right? You got to have a plan of how to handle conflict before you can actually start tackling the issues, because those are two different things and they get conflated a lot of times. And so you can't ever resolve any issues because you don't know how to fight.
Exactly. And one of the things that, her and I have come to the conclusion of in our years is that you have to like your partner. People focus on the love, and love is great, but you have to like your partner. You love your mother, you love your father, you love an aunt, uncle, cousin, but you don't want to spend 24 hours a day with them also, in a sense. So, that's where one of the strengths that we try to focus on, liking each other. And feel like if you learn to like your partner, a lot of those issues will be easier to resolve. There it is, like you say, your emotional maturity, that's going to determine that also.
Yeah. I guess this would be my last comment. I think the one thing, all of the components of emotional intelligence, they're all important, right? The self-awareness, the self-management, the empathy, and the relationship management. But if I had to pick one thing, pick one that I think would immediately change a lot of relationships and make them healthier, it would be empathy.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
We have a tendency to operate from a self-centered perspective, and that's human nature. That's natural, right? We are concerned about what we want and what we need, and we don't always think about the other person.
Right.
We think we are, but we're not.
Right.
And being emotionally intelligent, it is difficult sometimes to say we both feel how we feel, because you're both, however you feel is right. But for you to take a moment and say, okay, now, but we need to prioritize how he's feeling and work through that first. And then we can come back to how I'm feeling. That takes another level of emotional intelligence, right? You may not agree, but you still got to acknowledge what the person is feeling and figure out really what's the problem and how do we work through this. And while you are still holding on to your emotions and kind of putting them on a shelf just for a second, you got to work through one issue at a time. And that is definitely difficult.
Right.
All right. We're going to wrap this up if Miss Erin doesn't have anything else to share with us. And we're going to jump on to our next Let's Discuss It topic. And so here goes. Baby, we need to talk.
Huh?
Now, let's discuss it.
So for our Let's Discuss It segment, another passion project turned business maybe that you spoke to us about. We want to hear more about that. And I have it in my notes as a wine education business, but I'm going to let you tell us about that and your journey into that project.
Absolutely. So it is a wine education business. I have two business partners. The company is called Noir Valley. And we started Noir Valley after we realized that we would go to vineyards and not a lot of people look like us.
Right.
And when we would ask people like, well, hey, why don't you drink more wine? Or why don't you go to vineyards? They're like, well, I don't know what to drink, or I don't know anything about it. Or there's this idea that wine is for a certain social class. And that's not true. And so we started Noir Valley to help people that look like us really learn more about wine. right? To help people expand their palates. A lot of people start off with sweet wine. Wine goes so much deeper than just sweet wine. There's a whole world outside and past sweet wine. And so we try to help people expand their palates so that they can find their new favorite wine or go to a wine or restaurant and order their a glass of wine like an expert.
Okay.
So yes, it's definitely a a hobby turned business. But yes.
So with Noir Valley, do clients come to you all and you have classes or workshops, or do you hold like workshops at vineyards? How does that work?
Yep. So there are a few things that we do. We do host tastings. We do offer wine tours. We are based out of DC. So most of our wine tours, we go down to Virginia wine country. And then we also have wine socials where it's just come together and try new wines. So our last one, we did a Galentine's Day tasting.
Okay.
We took a group of women down to a vineyard in Virginia. They were able to participate in a guided tasting, and then we just sat and had girl talk. I mean, we talked about, just different topics or whatever. But people can also hire us for private events. So we can come to you and do a tasting. We've done like tours for birthday parties. So it's a combination of things. Some we do provide, but we are available to curate more of a private experience for people. One thing that we are looking to get more into is more of corporate tastings. Okay. Because all three of us have a certain expertise, right, with me in emotional intelligence and relationships. Another one, she's also an attorney. She does financial planning, like estate planning. And then the third one, she is a doctor of psychology. So she's a therapist.
Okay.
So we would like to get into the space of doing corporate trainings where, right, the wine is what brings us together, but we are also offering trainings in emotional intelligence and cultural sensitivities and things like that.
Awesome. That's awesome. And the wine element literally like brings a relaxed feel to it.
Yes.
So that is so neat. So any interesting stories? First of all, when you said vineyards in Virginia, that blew my mind.
Yeah.
So are there, like, I know California is famous for vineyards. We actually visited a vineyard in North Georgia. But are there other areas in the States that have like vineyards to where people can go and?
Absolutely. So there's tons. So like you said, in California, there's Napa and Sonoma are the big ones. In New York, it's called the Finger Lakes region.
Really?
Oh, okay.
In Oregon, Willamette is a big wine area. I'm trying to think of the other big. Virginia, absolutely. Like there's over 300 vineyards in Virginia.
Wow. No idea.
I know from because I'm a motorcyclist, and riding in the mountains area tends to be a lot of vineyards. I'll see them on the side of the road. We're going to North Georgia, and we've been to Tennessee, and there are a lot of vineyards in like the Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge area. So I just assume that where you have mountains, you have vineyards. I don't know.
Sometimes, not all the time. So so I actually was just sitting here studying before I got my book open. So the mountain is going to change the soil, which will change the grapes that you have. So not all grapes are grown like near mountains. There are some that are grown in warmer climates, right? The mountains are going to block the sun, so they won't get as much sun. So all of this changes the taste of the grapes or the types of grapes that can even be grown, because all grapes can't be grown everywhere. Right. So there are certain climates that are better for certain grapes. And so not always near mountains, but that is one like noticeable characteristics that will change the wine that you get.
Well, that's neat.
All right, so let's try this. All right. So I'm at my local Kroger.
Okay.
Go down there and wine now.
I can expression on your face.
This where the hood about to come out. I don't know what the hell I'm looking at. You know what I'm saying? Like, I see the brands, I see the different ones. The different brands have all pretty much the same style. So, from white to sweet to your Rieslings, your Cabernet. Can you explain some of that to us? Like,
Yeah, so
what is what for the average
For
person?
the average person,
absolutely.
Outline, but wants to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
What's one that you recommend trying? And I heard that some of them bring health benefits, things like that. So share with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I would say the best way to learn about wine is just to drink wine. Try it. People are like, how did you learn about it? I drink wine. Like, that's the best way to learn.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like the basics, right? You have red wine, you have white wine, and you have rosé. So rosé is the pink, red wine, and you have white wine. That's usually where people start. So if you were to go into, let's say, a wine shop, and you say, I need a bottle of wine, probably the first question they're going to ask you is red or white.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you gotta know that. And then they're going to ask you dry or sweet. So sweet wine obviously has more sugar in it. Dry wine is going to have like little to no sugar in it.
Right.
And so those are like the big dividers of where people are going to start. Either it's going to be sweet or dry, red or white, or sometimes rosé. And so I think a lot of people start at sweet, but if you are looking to transition more into the drier wines, I would say start with Riesling, because Riesling goes from like the whole scale. So Riesling can be, off dry, medium, dry, sweet, all of that. So Riesling is a good one to kind of scale you on down to the drier side, which I feel like is the better side. So yeah, you just have to try stuff. Now I will say, I made a face when you said Kroger because they might not have the best quality, right? And so I would never tell anybody to go and try Sutter Home or Barefoot to really understand what that wine is supposed to be like. So I would say at least the Total Wine, fine wine and spirits, something that's going to have more of a variety. And there's so many different types of grapes, and you just have to start trying and see what you like and just drink more of that.
So you're saying that the drier wines are better. Is that for health benefits, or is that just better taste,
or is it better? It's just a preference.
Yes, I was going to say better is my preference.
Okay.
Yeah. So red wine does have health benefits, but I mean, I drink both. But they do say red wine has, health benefits for you. But it's really, a good wine is a wine that you enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So even if you are a sweet wine drinker, right, don't let any of us wine snobs, right, ridicule you for liking your sweet wine.
I love my
right?
So what you're telling me is I'm shortening myself by getting that $5 bottle of wine that they have sale three for $5.
Yeah. So I mean, so here's the other thing, right? Why are you getting it? Are you getting it just because you want something to drink? You thirsty? Cool. Those wines are not going to have a lot of character to them. And so, right, you see people talking about like how to taste wine. So they call it like the 5 S's. So, when you see them looking in a glass or swirling a glass and smelling it, right? Those cheaper wines are not going to be able to really give you much. Wine is an experience. And so the swirling of the glass so that it gets oxygen and you can actually smell the aromas that are in it, right? And you compare that to the aromas, the flavors that you taste, right? It's a whole thing, a whole experience when you are in that space, right? It's not just like, oh, let me just down this. Like, it's not a shot, right? I'm not just going to take a shot of wine. It's an experience to really appreciate, I think, what the winemaker does, the effort and energy that goes into making a bottle of wine. So yeah, it's more of an experience than just let me turn up. I'm not going to drink wine if I want to turn up. Like, that's not.
Yeah.
So
I got you.
And I think the first bottle I had was during the pandemic shutdown.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen the blue sparkling wine?
Bel Air?
It's I don't know what the brand is. Literally, the wine is blue. And it's probably like a white wine because it's drier. But things like that, are those like laughed upon? Obviously, because you're like looking at me like blue wine.
She don't know what the heck you talking
about. So you're probably talking about Bel Air. Let me see. This one?
I don't think
I don't
so.
think it was.
Oh, well, I don't know
It's
any other blue wine.
literally the color of the wine is blue, but it was a dry wine. So I'm guessing like things like that are more novelty than serious wine.
So yeah, the only blue I'm not a huge fan of. I mean, I'm not very familiar. I don't know what other blue wine it could have been other than Bel Air, which is a sparkling wine.
What about the box wines? Are those like I've seen on TV and stuff, people get the box of wine and that's what they'll drink on for a while. Is that like
Yeah, I've never bought a box wine.
mm,
So I can't really tell you what it's like. It's not something that I would like,
Never
oh, let's go get a
right.
box wine.
Yeah.
It's
you
not.
probably wouldn't.
Yeah, like we drank box wine in like college, but even then I still never was the one to purchase it.
Right.
Can you see that? And Saraceni, Saraceni.
Okay, I see it.
I
have never heard of this. Let me see what it is. It's a sparkling wine.
It's probably more novelty, I'm guessing.
Acclaimed blue sparkling wine. This is actually made from the same grapes that is used to make Prosecco.
Okay.
Which is interesting. And so it leads me to believe that it's Italian.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it's actually a sweet wine, it says on here.
Okay.
ABV. So yeah, so here's another tip. So the ABV, alcohol by volume, which tells you how much alcohol is in it. Mm-hmm. The less alcohol, the sweeter it's going to be.
Okay.
So the sweeter, the less alcohol. And so it's like at that point, why are you drinking it, in my opinion?
Right.
So the drier, the more alcohol.
Okay.
So yeah, this is actually Italian with that grape. Yeah, I have not heard of this.
It popped up on social media. Like I said, it was during the pandemic. So what else do I have to do other than order wine and taste it?
Did you like it?
It was okay. It wasn't sweet enough for me.
Really? And it says it's a sweet wine.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, you just like sugar.
Basically.
Got it.
Basically. So
have you heard of the McBride sisters?
I have heard of them.
And I was listening to a podcast and they were on there, and I actually ordered anything from them, but I've actually seen some of their stuff in some of our local liquor stores.
Yeah, so they have two lines. So they have the McBride collection, then they also have Black Girls Wine.
Yeah, Black Girls.
Yeah.
Well, this has been interesting. I'm gonna have to see if I can expand my wine palette so that when we speak to you again.
So let me ask you this while we're on it. Frowned upon my Kroger wine. And I'm a little hood about myself, so you know. Now, if I'm going to go out buy some wine, this is for my and you know, if some people might think they're getting more value for, you know, like if I spend $100, I'm getting this excellent bottle of wine. If I spend $20, I'm not getting anything. So what do you tell a person like that?
So the price point doesn't necessarily indicate the quality of the wine.
Okay.
Right. I'm always going to tell you that a good wine is one that you enjoy.
Okay.
Right? So that is always going to be what I tell you. If you enjoy it, it's a good wine, whether it's $50, $20, or $100.
Right.
For an example, me, I do not prefer champagne. I'm always going to pick Prosecco over champagne. Like it's just not, if it's up to me, it's just not going to be in my glass. Right. But champagne can be on the higher end. You're going to spend at least $75, $80, $100 on a bottle of champagne. I've had expensive champagne and I'm like, this isn't it for me.
Right.
So it's not necessarily about the price point. It is about, you know, you will start to learn the grapes that you like. And so I don't prefer the grapes that are used to make champagne. Right. Which is why it's just not going to be something that I buy. Like you'll probably never find a bottle of champagne in my house unless somebody brings it.
I don't care for champagne either. I don't like the bubbles. I'm not. I want some. I drink soda.
So one of my business partners is like that. And so let me clarify. When I say champagne, I mean like actual champagne. So all sparkling wine is not champagne.
Right.
And I know people, they see bubbles and they call it champagne. It's not. In order for it to be champagne, it has to come from Champagne, France. Right? Okay. It has to come from Champagne, France. There are certain grapes that they have to use. They use Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. And there's a certain way that it's made.
Okay.
Right? That's the only way that it is called champagne. Anything else is a sparkling wine. So Prosecco is another sparkling wine, but that is from Italy. It has to come from Italy. It has to use the Glera grape. Cava is from Spain. Cava and champagne are made similarly. Just Cava is made in Spain. Champagne is made in Champagne, France. Anything else is just going to be a sparkling wine.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just going to be a sparkling wine. Like, you're not getting a $20 bottle of champagne. Like, that's just not going to happen. It's a sparkling wine.
Right.
And so when I say I don't prefer champagne, I mean like the actual champagne that you're going to pay about $100 for a bottle. Okay. I don't prefer it. And so the price point is not right. Somebody else, I have a friend, me and him go back and forth all the time about which bubbles are better. Like, we actually did like a battle of the bubbles where I bought my first Prosecco, he brought his champagne. Mm-hmm. And I liked one of his out of three. And I'm sure they were more expensive.
To expand our wine palette, what do we do? Just taste test?
Yep. Taste it. Think about flavors that you like in food and just go in the store and start trying stuff.
All right. I like that.
So I can go to Kroger and start trying.
You can go to Kroger and start trying it. If you want now, just know that it may not be, amazing, representation of that grape.
Right. Yeah.
But you will start to see grapes that you enjoy and then just start trying other ones. There is a new wine shop in DC that I got a chance to go to. And I really think that it is interesting the way that their shop is set up. Usually when you go to a wine shop, you see regions, like where the grape is from, or is named by the grape.
Right.
But the way that theirs is a number system. And so it goes from 1 to 10, 1 being lighter wines, 10 being bolder wines. And so once you know a wine that you like and you find it within their number system, let's say you like light sweet wines, it's probably going to be a 1. Everything in that 1 should be similar to that you can try.
Okay.
And it'll be different grapes and all of that. So I thought that was a really interesting. They have a store in Boston. They just opened one in DC. And so I think that was, really interesting. But I think the way that you just have to go and try stuff, try and go to restaurants and try different things. Every time that you're there, just try something else. When I go to a wine shop, I pick out what I know that I came for. But then I also let one of the people that work at the store pick out one for me.
Okay.
Right.
And I always, I let somebody else pick one. So that's how, I'll learn if I like it or if I don't.
All right. That's a homework assignment that I can get with.
I can get with that. I can get with that. I think, of course, in our community, we tend to gravitate towards what's popular, and, like at one point in time, I'm aging myself, but Cristal was like one of the premier champagnes, wines. I don't even know what it is. I know I tasted it one time and it was disgusting to me. And even some of the other, Remy Martin, that was a popular one in the early 90s. And I was like, that's disgusting. Like, what are we drinking here? So, I mean, as far as people who are brand conscious, love to worry about brands. So you're saying that, don't worry about the brands. Just try something and see what you like, and go from there.
Yeah. So those brands, that's a matter of marketing and the amount of money you put behind it. Right. It has nothing to do with the quality of wine. I went to Italy in August for my birthday, and I went to the region where they make Prosecco. And so I asked them about La Marca. La Marca is the light blue label that everybody drinks. They were so offended. Some hadn't even heard of it. Some were so offended that I asked about La Marca. One told me that's like the McDonald's of Prosecco.
Wow.
Right. But that is the big thing in the United States. When you hear Prosecco, they're going to have La Marca. And it's just about the dollar amount, the marketing. And actually with those types of things, the quality is likely not going to be as good because it's actually expensive to get your wine here. And so if you can afford to get it here, right, you probably are mass producing,
Right.
which just decreases the quality and the price for you.
Right.
And so by the time it gets here, it's not a great representation of that wine, that style of wine.
Right.
And so these brands that we see a lot of, right, a lot have to do with the marketing.
Right.
A lot of the celebrity wines are white labeled, meaning they just buy the wine from somebody else and they partner with that vineyard, they partner with that company so that they can become this big brand and popular. Not usually great. Like celebrity wines in the wine community actually has like a stigma associated with it. Yeah.
Oh, it wouldn't be like a name drop if I tell you I had some of Snoop's wine. That would.
The look on her face tells it all.
Right.
That tells it all.
I haven't, so.
But I mean, again, if you like it, you like it, but you wouldn't have it at my house.
But to be honest with you, I'm like, anything that a lot of people are drawn to, especially people from the hood, I don't even fool with it. Like, everybody like as far as like tequila, everybody's on Casamigos. I like Casamigos, don't get me wrong, but I don't even fool with it like that. Because I mean, it's like it's almost like what they do to everything. They just so like I don't even want a pair of J's anymore because
yeah, they make it a cultural thing, right? So they put a lot of money behind that because you got to think the company is in business to make money.
Right.
How do we make it a cultural thing? Black people are lit. We drive a lot of things. And so we can get the right celebrity to endorse it or to advertise and to market it.
They know 90% of us gonna buy it just because they drink it.
Right.
Just the way we.
And so and so it's not necessarily about the quality at that point. It's they just want to make the money.
I'm that person that even though everybody's going through the front door, I want to go to the side door and see what's really going on. Like that's why I like people like you that are incorporated in that type of business to say, okay, what do you recommend? Because I want to try stuff that you recommend. Because listen to them people. Like I said, when I tried that Cristal, I was like, that's what this is.
Right. Yeah. You just
gotta. I want to throw up when I see the bottle.
Yeah, you just gotta. Those are cultural things. Those brands are just spending a lot of money to make money. So you have to just figure out what it is that you like and try more of that, so that you aren't, And then, so here's the other thing, right? You try these brands. So I know people that don't like Prosecco, but they've only ever had La Marca. It's not the same thing.
Right.
At all whatsoever. Like what I had over there was so amazing that we can't get it here. Like I just ordered like wine from Italy because we don't have it here. Right. So if you want to drink it, again, I'm not knocking anybody for anything that they drink, but in terms of learning more about wine to really get a good representation of that style of wine, right, you're going to have to find something that is of a little bit better quality. And usually the things that are mass produced are not going to be of quality or the best representation.
So you're saying we need to be, because like where we are, there are not a lot of vineyards in our area. A lot of times we have to, that's why I brought up Kroger, because we have to go to the grocery store, either the liquor store, to get any type of wine. And it's like when I walk into the liquor store, they have this entire section. I'm just like, man. So I typically go for what I think that I know, but I'm gonna start trying, like you said.
Yeah, just try stuff. There are a lot of wine clubs, right? If there aren't any other wine shops in your area, which there may be, and you just don't know of them.
Because
right. So like I would look for a boutique wine shop, like a small where there's one and it's not that big. Right. That is where I would recommend people to start. But if not, there are places that you could buy wine online. So like wine.com is a good one. And they actually have people there that will make recommendations for you. Like there's the little chat box at the bottom. They will actually help you pick out wine. So there are definitely ways to, still get wine. A lot of vineyards and all of that, they have wine subscriptions. There's naked wine, and there's some of them are not that expensive. And they send you wine every month that you get to try. So there's definitely ways so that you aren't subjected only to grocery store wine.
All right.
Well, we're going to look into that so we can start expanding our wine palette.
Let me know what you get.
We shall.
All
right. Well, if any of our listeners want to learn more about you, either from the coaching aspect or your wine aspect, how can they find you online?
Absolutely. So I am always open to working with both women and couples, right? I prefer to work with both because you both need to be on board. Like if one person is doing the work I will, but my preference is to work with couples, right? And so if you feel like there are some issues that you guys can't quite put your finger on, right? Maybe things just aren't the same. You aren't connecting the way that you used to. Maybe there's a new season in your life, right? There's a new baby, there's a new job, right? Things change in a relationship, right? You're not going to be the same person you were when you got together, right? So if you feel like you need help really identifying what those issues are and coming up with a plan to move past it, even if you don't have any issues at the moment, right? If you know that communication is not a strong suit for either of you, right? And you have different communication styles and you want help understanding each other or learning how to communicate in a way that your partner understands you, I'm here to help. And so you can absolutely find me on all social media platforms. It's just my name is Erin F. Darden. So ERIN, F as in Frank, DARDEN. Send me a message. You can also send me an email at info@erinfdarden.com. And I am, here. I want to help. Like I said, I really feel like this is my purpose at the moment. I've taken those skills from being a lawyer and just applied it to this personal setting where I'm still asking the right questions to help you, get to the things that you may be not aware of, or you might be trying to hide, right? You can't hide with me. I ask the difficult questions. I don't care if you don't like me, all of that. We're going to get to the bottom of it. Right. So that is what I am here for. Like I said, conflict is inevitable in a relationship. It's just how you deal with it that matters.
All right.
That sounds good. So you like a little prosecutor, like you.
I don't ask aggressively, but I ask the right questions. Let's say it that way.
Well, thank you so much again for being a guest and joining us and sharing your knowledge. Thank you for enlightening us on our wine journey.
Working on it.
We need to grow up and expand that wine palette. And we have really enjoyed speaking with you today.
Thank you so much for having me. Anytime, if there's anything else I can do to help your community, let me know.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Beyond I Do podcast.
Please make sure to like this episode and also subscribe to our podcast. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at the Beyond I Do podcast.
And until next time, we will holler at y'all.